Okay, folks, we're making scalloped potatoes. Everybody has their own methods. I find this a foolproof method. I have already prepared my pan. All I've done is taken a 9x9 and I've buttered it. So that's ready to go. I have peeled 4 large potatoes. I'll get to that later. So for 4 large potatoes, I have measured in and melted 3 tablespoons of butter. I am now adding 3 tablespoons of flour. Basically what you're doing is you're making a white sauce. And the reason I measure everything is at one time I didn't, and sometimes my scalloped potatoes were too creamy and other times they were dry, and it was guessing by golly. This is my foolproof method. My burner's on. Into the melted butter went the flour, and now you're going to stir that, and you have to be pretty consistent because it's a roux and so it will stick. And what you want to do is you want to get your mixture to where it's just bubbling. When it comes to a nice bubble consistency, you will add 1.5 cups of milk. Now, that milk, sometimes I do add a little more, it depends, but I'm pretty sure and confident with the amount of potatoes I have that 1.5 cups of milk will be just fine. One more thing I'm going to tell you that I do. Most people add their onion to scalloped potatoes for a little flavoring. Now, you don't want the onion to overpower your potatoes, but you do need the flavor. And I know a lot of people just sprinkle it on their potatoes. I prefer that when my white sauce is starting to cook, I add my onions right into my white sauce. And I do that because I find it takes away from an overpowering onion flavor, and the onions get started softening a little faster. This is just a personal preference I have. If you find something works better for you than what I'm telling you, well, by all means, you're the ones who's going to be eating it. Okay, this is starting to bubble, but not quite all over. And you'll notice I'm stirring it consistently. That's pretty important. That's another reason why I like to get things prepared ahead of time, because once you get your milk in here, you have to bring it to a boil. And milk, flour, and butter scorch, no matter what you do. And I have good pots and pans, but I find they still can scorch. So you have to be moving it around all the time in your pot. Now I hope you folks can see that. That's nicely bubbling all over. So I'm going to measure out my milk. I use 1% milk. Now my mother would probably think that's sacrilegious because of course she always used whole milk, but in our modern day and age, whoops, got a little bit away. That's okay. It's not more than a tablespoon anyway, if that, so it's not a big deal. Now you've got to get working that right away until you see that things are nicely dissolved. Of course, milk is very cold. Now this is about the only time when I think it's okay to leave your white sauce because it's still cold enough. My heat, by the way, is on medium. And to this, I'm going to add some salt and pepper. And for a guideline, I would say you're going to use a pretty generous teaspoon of salt to 4 large potatoes, and pepper to taste. Again, you've got to kind of go with what your family likes and how you like food to taste. If you're not sure, just give it a taste. Add more salt if you need it later on. So that's about a teaspoon. We don't go too crazy with the measuring. It doesn't have to be that concise. It's not like baking. You can use white pepper. I prefer black. I find white is actually a little spicier. And my husband likes pepper, so we use perhaps more than you would. I'd say at least 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. Now, you don't have to certainly watch this come to a boil, but what you want to do is you want it to bring it to a nice, consistent boil, and then you have to keep stirring, and then you're going to lower the heat, and you cook it until there's no more starchy flavor from your flour. So we're going to break now, and when you come back, I'll show you the next step. Okay, the sauce has cooked for almost 5 minutes. Now I'm going to just tell you what I did. As I said, I add my onions when my sauce first comes to a boil. Because my onions are cold, and I'll tell you why they're cold, I pre-chop onions and keep them in the freezer. So I've defrosted what I wanted, which in this case was a little less than 1/3 of a cup. So when I put them in, they're cold, so then I lose my boil. So now I'm just bringing it back up to a full boil. And usually if you do your onions from warm, shall we say, then all you want to do is after your sauce comes to a boil, you cook it for another 5 minutes, always stirring it, and that gets rid of any starchiness from your flour. So I'm going to turn that down. I don't want it to stick. I'm just going to leave it for a minute. I'm going to show you what I've done. I prepare my potatoes ahead of time, and I've soaked them in a little bit of cold water so that first of all they don't turn brown, and also I want to get the starchiness out. Now I have used large potatoes. You can tell by the slices I used 4 good-sized potatoes. Just going to give that a whack. The sauce is boiling, and I put my potatoes into my 9x9. Again, it's been buttered. I try to arrange them to fill in the holes. My sauce is still nicely bubbling away there. Being very mindful not to let it burn or scorch. Now we like having leftovers, so you may not want to do quite as many. Just remember, less potatoes, then use a little less sauce. So instead of the 3 and 3 in measurements and 1 1/2 of milk, use 2, 2, and 1 cup of milk. Okay, we're ready to have our sauce go on our potatoes. Excuse me while I get my handy dandy lovely spatula. And we're just going to pour that right on there. Now, I already have something in the oven. I have a ham going because we're having ham and scalloped potatoes tonight. Scalloped potatoes normally require a hotter oven than what my ham does. My ham is at about 325. I started it at 350. Scalloped potatoes normally go at about 400, 375. Now, because of the longer time my potatoes are going to be in the oven, and my oven is being shared by the ham, to start my potatoes, I'm going to foil cover them. When you do that, you do have to keep an eye because it will bubble, and you don't want to lose your sauce onto your foil. That's the first thing. But also, I cover it because of the longer cooking time. I don't want to lose my sauce and have my potatoes dry out. This is kind of just an aside, since you probably will not be doing something at the same time in your oven when you're making scalloped potatoes. But I'm just letting you know little tricks that you learn and things that you know after you've been cooking for a while. I always assume when I'm talking that I'm talking to a novice who maybe hasn't done a lot of cooking. Or if you have, maybe you still want to pick up some tips. I read cookbooks all the time to pick up tips. I think most cooks do. Okay, and they're ready to pop in the oven. Okay, I'm taking the scalloped potatoes out of the oven because they are certainly finished. Now I had uncovered those, as I said before, so that they would get a little bit brown on top. There's your scalloped potatoes, folks. They're all ready to go, and we are about to sit down and eat. I'll just pick that up and give you a look. Don't they look yummy?